Well, I would like to start with welcoming everybody here. Or I would say it in German, also schön grüßt, dass Sie hier sind heute Morgen. We would like to start officially today with the opening of this academic ceremony in which Mr. Erik Preißner will defend his academic thesis entitled Rethinking Mindfulness in Health Promotion from Threat to Targeting Eating. May I invite you, Mr. Candidate, to present a summary of your study and the conclusion of your thesis in the next 15 minutes. I give you the word.
Thank you. Dear Pro-Rector, members of the Corona, friends, family, in person and online. It is my pleasure to take the next 15 minutes to present to you a summary of the findings of my dissertation. Changing how we eat is really hard. If you are somebody who finds it easy to just cut down on certain food items that you enjoy, but you know that they're not healthy and you probably shouldn't be eating them, count yourself blessed if you don't have that issue. Yeah, because for many people, this is a really important and emotional daily struggle. One approach that is often used to help people with this struggle is mindfulness. Mindfulness originated from Buddhist practices and traditions. Since the 70s, it has been used in the West also as part of or as a full therapeutic program. Over the years, mindfulness has grown into what is now a billion-dollar industry. And even though the term being mindful seems to be absolutely everywhere we go, it's surprisingly unclear what it is, how it works, or even if it works for changing eating behaviors. So, in my dissertation, I read over 9,000 summaries of research, twice, and I focused on about 250 relevant studies and book chapters, and 1 in 4 never even mentioned what they meant by the term mindfulness, and they wrote an entire book chapter or research article about it, telling people how to use it to help people change their behavior. And even if it was defined, it was used as an umbrella term. So sometimes meaning it's a personal trait that you have, it can be a momentary state that you're in or how you feel, and sometimes they just meant the practice or one specific exercise. And also, some definitions had just 2 elements, and others had even 17. But all said that mindfulness means paying attention or having awareness in the present moment. Most articles also mentioned 1 or more so-called acceptance or attitudinal elements, such as not judging our inner or environmental experiences, so thoughts and emotions, and being curious and being open, not reacting to thoughts and emotions to try and change them, or simply the term acceptance. And many Western researchers argue that these acceptance elements are what make mindfulness mindfulness and not just attention, because otherwise we could just call it paying attention. It is rather the way in which we pay attention and how we deal with what we notice within ourselves and our environment, which makes mindfulness mindfulness. To answer a central question of my dissertation, does mindfulness work to change eating behaviors? In short, not really. It might help people eat less high-calorie snacks, but it doesn't really seem to help with eating more fruits and vegetables or with meeting dietary guidelines. And compared to other health promotion interventions that are already used, mindfulness generally does worse. But what makes this assessment of whether it works so much more complicated are a few problems. So the first one is that mindfulness interventions differ so much in which specific exercises are taught, and whether they are taught by a professional trainer or by some researcher, whether they are taught to a group, whether they are taught to individuals, whether people are using an app, or both. And also for how long these programs last. And because all of the programs differ so much, and information on the program is unfortunately not being reported that well, it's very difficult for other researchers to understand how mindfulness was even used in the intervention, and makes it basically impossible to repeat the study. A second problem is that mindfulness programs often mix practice with other exercises that we indeed already use in the health promotion field to help people change their behavior. So, for example, we try and increase people's knowledge of certain risk factors. We help people plan out small goals towards change. We try to help them believe that they can actually change even when life gets a bit tough or stressful. And we also include, for example, feedback to our participants to see where exactly they are now at in the change process. But mixing these elements with mindfulness exercises and not evaluating them separately from one another makes it very, very difficult to know whether it was the mindfulness or a health promotion method that helped people change. The third problem is simply a lack of measurement. Less than 40% of the articles I found even measure mindfulness. And those that do measure it do so with very different methods. So for example, people sometimes use dichotomous items, which means now after this intervention, are you more mindful? Yes, no. And other people take all of these different elements I mentioned in the definitions and measure them separately, and some measure them all in one score. And that also makes it really, really difficult to understand what the working mechanisms are and which part of mindfulness help people change, the acceptance or the awareness. In part 2 of my dissertation, I looked into which awareness and acceptance elements of mindfulness might actually matter for changing your eating behavior. I found that everyday mindfulness traits are not really related to eating a healthier diet. The only small link was that people who naturally paid more attention in their everyday life ate slightly fewer snacks. But as we learned earlier, paying attention is not mindfulness, it's just paying attention. However, if we look at mindfulness that is very specific to the food context, which we often call mindful eating in the field, I found that both attention and acceptance elements might be more relevant than a general mindfulness trait. I found that allowing your feelings about food, and specifically food cravings, to exist the way they are without reacting to desperately try and change them, that can actually help people eat healthier. In other words, put less pressure on yourself. And people who actually paid attention to whether they felt hungry or full, they tended to eat healthier. But people who paid strong attention to food in their environment were more likely to eat unhealthy. So paying attention itself may have different sub-elements that function in different ways and either help people or may even be a barrier. And grouping these into one mathematical score may not really tell us researchers which skills our participants already had or may need to be supported in. Yeah, who are our participants? This led then to part 3. I wanted to know which eating-specific mindfulness skills do people in the general population already have? Which combination of skills maybe eats in a healthier way? And depending on what mindful eating skills, so acceptance and awareness, which ones you have, what are their thoughts and opinions on actually using mindful eating as a practice form? So in short, when you are recruiting people for your program, who shows up? Or for whom does it work? And in health promotion, we often talk about targeting our interventions and tailoring things, so matching what we teach the best we can to important characteristics of our participants. We do this to make sure that we indeed meet people where they are at in their journey to change. So in this case, to develop a healthier relationship with food and eat in a health-promoting way. I found that people living with overweight and obesity had a higher awareness of food in their environment, but paired with less acceptance of how they ate in comparison to people with a lower body weight. And in addition, I found 3 groups of people, each with a different mix of attention and acceptance skills. We have one group that has very moderate awareness and acceptance skills. We have one group that has basically no awareness skills at all, but they have very high acceptance, they're fine with it. And we have one other group that has very high awareness of food in their environment and of food cues within themselves, but they really struggle detaching from feelings of guilt and shame surrounding food. And this last group also disclosed, 10% of them, that they struggle in their everyday life because of an eating disorder. And interestingly, this is an at-risk group, and they knew the most about mindful eating, surprisingly, and they strongly believed that it could actually help them develop a healthier relationship with food, and they wanted to try it most. But they also felt the least confident that they could actually do it. And they worried that it would be too stressful for them to do, too time-consuming, and even to make them feel guilty about how they normally ate, which is interesting because that is the opposite of what a mindful eating program intends on doing, to get rid of this guilt and shame and to accept cravings, emotions, and thoughts about food without this pressure of trying to change constantly how we think and feel. So if we want to ensure that the programs we develop and test and deliver are safe and effective for our participants, it's important that researchers and practitioners alike are aware of such differences in beliefs, but also the awareness and acceptance skills that exist to different degrees in the humans that we interact with. And if you remember in part 1, I talked about how health promotion strategies often mix mindfulness strategies with other health promotion strategies. And it's really hard to tell which one helped. So this third part of my dissertation shows that these additional health behavior strategies might actually be very helpful or necessary to have in an intervention. So for example, helping people believe that they can actually practice if life gets too stressful or if they're not feeling well. It's just important that these health promotion strategies are added to programs on purpose for good reason and are evaluated separately from the mindfulness elements. To conclude, my dissertation shows that we need better definitions and measurement of what this mindfulness actually is. We also need studies that separate mindfulness strategies from other behavior change strategies. My research also shows that mindful eating, so food-specific mindfulness skills, seem more promising than trying to target just the everyday mindfulness that you have and magically having it transfer. Yeah? And finally, we need to recognize that people come with very different skills, struggles, and beliefs, and meeting people where they are at is essential to make a program safe and effective. Thank you for your attention or awareness, depending on how you define it. And I now give the word back to the prorector.
Thank you, Mr. Candidate. Thank you, Mr. Preißner, for your excellent and very nicely illustrated presentation. My compliments to this. Before we proceed, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce several members here present. First of all, my name is Professor Steinbusch. I'm the prorector, and I'm assisted today by Professor Reuter, who is my secretary during this event. But more important is, of course, the promotion team who sits opposite of me. And I would like to introduce them also to the onliners who are here available. On the right side is Mr. De Ruyter, or Dr. De Ruyter, better. He's assistant professor at the Department of Health Promotion. In the middle is Dr. Oenemar. She's associate professor of health and combination at the Open University in the Netherlands. And on the left side is the first promoter, Emeritus Professor De Vries, and he's Emeritus Professor in Health Communication. And of course, the team guided the student so that he can answer all questions who will be addressed today. We have today 5 members in the Corona, and also for your information, and one of the members will be online, but he will be later on the big screen. Saying this, I think we have to start, and the opposition will be opened by Professor Krohne. Professor Krohne was also the chair of the assessment committee, and she is professor in prevention and community care, and I'd like to give her the opportunity to discuss with you. Professor Krohne.
Thank you. Dear candidate, I read your dissertation with great attention, or mindfully, if you would like. And I actually would like to compliment you and your supervisors for this important work. You have approached this mindfulness and health from multiple theoretical perspectives, which makes the thesis both comprehensive and ambitious also. At the same time, while reading, several questions and reflections came up that I would like to discuss with you. And I would like to start with chapter 7. And in this chapter, you identify 3 different profiles of mindful eaters. And you found the same profile at different time points. And as I liked your figures really very much, I would like to discuss one of the figures, because you actually do not explain that one. And that is the figure on page 201, and it's figure A3. So would you please help me with understanding this? And maybe I also have some questions then.
Highly esteemed opponent, thank you so much for your compliments and for this question. Yeah, so these are density plots, and you can see, so...
it's the A3, yeah? That's,
A2? No, A3?
A3, yeah.
Oh, A3, yeah. Okay. Yes, that is a Sankey diagram, and it shows the movement of participants, whether they would be assigned to a different group if you run the analyses again over multiple time points. Yeah. So I took the same analyses at 3 time points, and I show essentially whether the assignment is changing.
Yeah, but then I was wondering, because there are 3 different latent class analyses. So are they, if you look at the latent classes, are they really comparable over these time points, or do they, because the scores might change, or how can I see it? Yeah.
So these lines in the middle, they mean essentially completely different analyses. So the scores were not linked in any way, and I just modeled, let's say participant was assigned at the first time point to group number 1. Were they still in this group at the second time point if I do the same analyses again? And would they remain in this group also at the third time point? This is what that shows. So the profiles that you developed are really comparable. Because I actually conducted some of these latent class analysis, and I see if you conduct that the scores sometimes change over time. So that someone that scored, for example, 3 in the first one and scored 4 in the second one, change profile, or it still remains 3, that it changed profiles because the cutoff score is maybe different. Yeah, I would not say that the cutoff scores are that different. And also you will see when you look at the figure that there was mainly movement from group number 3 to like group number 1. I also ran some analysis on this, but it's simply that the MME group is the mean. So sometimes when there's less participants and the mean shifts slightly, then you have somewhat different cutoffs, but not really. And then they would move to a different group. But and so then the second group from they are dropping out most often. So that's okay. Which are the people with the very low awareness, but high acceptance. And interesting thing is that they also ate more high protein, less protein, less snacks in general. So that's interesting. So I still figure out. Thank you. I think that the model became more clear to me. The other one is I have also a question. You also mentioned it in your presentation. Now is the emotional eaters, because also in this graph you see there is a group that are
how you call it, unacceptingly aware profile. So you also mentioned whether there's some relationship with emotional eaters, and then in your discussion you actually come to this this discussion whether some aspect of mindfulness should be integrated more in the clinical setting, or you make a difference between clinical setting and the population setting. So what are your ideas about it? Is mindfulness interventions not for the public, the community setting then, or only for the clinical setting?
That was a lot of questions. Okay, let me start with the last part. I do think there's some value in it for example, recognizing people that are subclinical. So we see here in this very, very big, over 1,000 people population sample, that that you have 10% already struggling with an eating disorder, and I did not assess this like through the structured questionnaires. And you're catching so many more people that are very close to developing an eating disorder. So I think there's some value there, but I do also think very honestly for the majority of the population, they think, why should I care?
Yeah.
Yeah. And regarding the emotional eating aspect, I don't know if you have further questions on this or somebody else, so I don't want to like answer too much about my thoughts on the overlap of the mindful eating scale and emotional eating scale. But there have been some criticisms on how much overlap is there in the item content.
Yeah, so that's no, you actually didn't study it here, but then I also thought so. But then you also mentioned in the discussion this negative or adverse effects that might be. Is that related to that, or how? Yes,
for sure. So there's unfortunately lots of mindfulness and mindful eating intervention in particular that only teach awareness. And either they do this really as the main component because they think if people just pay more attention to their food, that will change things, right? Yeah. But for this one group, it makes it so much worse, and you might trigger more problematic eating behaviors because then they can't escape it. They see it everywhere, they notice it everywhere in themselves and their environment, but you're not giving them the tools to deal with what they notice effectively. Yeah. And so I'm wondering for lots of mindfulness and mindful eating programs what the value is, or even like if they truly make it worse for participants, if they don't teach the tools, namely non-judgment, non-reactance, for example, to deal with it. Yeah. But for other groups, these skills might not be relevant at all. Yeah. But for this one group, it can really make or break things. And imagine you arrive at a program having tried many different diets.
And are there interventions already looking at this?
They are slowly starting to measure adverse effects. Yeah. I found some studies starting with this in 2018 and from 2021. But there again, it's a bit of an issue. How do you, what is an adverse effect? And something that might be triggering for you might not be triggering for somebody else. Yeah. And so something, you can give people a huge list, and if there's just one adverse effect, does that completely disqualify an approach? Maybe not, because for the broad population, this specific trigger is not an issue.
Yeah, okay, I understand. Do I have still one? I don't have.
If it's a short question.
That's a problem. So I'm thinking about what's the question. Because if you look, in chapter 3, you looked at the common elements of this. So if you look at the elements of mindfulness, what would you think is the most important element?
Non-reactance.
Non-reactance.
In my opinion. Okay. Also, actually, interestingly, when you look at the FAMES and the factor analyses, the factor that explains most of the variance is non-reactance. But yes, also I think this is the tool that helps people the most, in my opinion, if they struggle with with the awareness aspect.
So we have to assess whether it can be changed.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The opposition now will be continued by Professor Reuter. He was also a member of your assessment committee, and he's professor in health and social psychology, and I'd like to give him the word.
Thank you, Mr. Rector. Dear candidate, of course, I already approved the manuscript with great pleasure. That was really already a joy to read. And yesterday I started preparing this defense, and I really looked forward to this defense. Somehow I thought it will be interesting. And now I listen to your talk and your presentation and think, well, this is really, we can challenge you, I think.
Please don't.
And by the way, the book is beautiful. Sometimes we call it een boekje in Dutch, but this is a real book with beautiful art also, so I was nicely surprised there. But from the very start of reading your work, and yesterday again, I was struggling, and really struggling with the concept of mindfulness. And I think you did also. You spent 5 minutes on part 1 in your presentation, where you say, what is mindfulness? The struggle is really about what it is, and sometimes even you, in one sentence, you change between, you use the word determinant and you use the word strategy. And then you also talk about mindful eating. So the question is pretty simple. What is it? Is it a determinant, a change method, a behavior? What is it? I don't think it can be a determinant if you look at trait mindfulness, because that's really not changeable or difficult to change, at least. You doubt already, okay, but I think it would not be, it might be a very relevant one, but in terms of changeability, it will be more difficult than maybe other factors, elements of it. If it would be a change method or a strategy, what are then the parameters of use? What are the mechanisms that makes it work? And what determinants is it targeting? And if it's a behavior, what are then the determinants of this behavior? So let me first ask the question, what is it? Is it a determinant, a strategy, or a behavior?
Highly esteemed opponent, thank you very much for your compliments. I'm happy that you look forward to it and that you like the cover. And thank you for the question. So, what is it? Yes, that is my answer. It can be all different things if you look at the literature. Because, like you, most researchers don't know what it is. And as I showed the umbrella, this is the current state in the literature. People use this term to mean everything.
But I'm asking you.
Yes, you are asking me. Okay. I think it can be all of them. Truly, I do believe that mindfulness can be an exercise, or multiple of them, that you can promote mindfulness through meditation, but also through non-meditation exercises. I believe that mindfulness, you can feel mindful in a certain moment, and you can also just have mindfulness as a trait. To answer another question you had regarding is it a determinant, it is difficult to change. Well, the idea of mindfulness is that if you take the practice, and you practice, and you practice, and you practice, you have more and more states of mindfulness. And the more states you have, that is supposed to transfer and can even somewhat, to some degree, change the trait aspect. So I would say it can be all of them.
Okay, so you agree with the literature? But I'm not sure. I don't remember reading the word umbrella in your book, but you used it in your presentation. And okay, so I was thinking, yes, it's an umbrella term, and that's quite logical, makes sense. If you read it and you have this struggle that I was struggling with. But then I was looking for intervention mapping. You know, I'm one of the co-authors at the moment of intervention mapping, and I'm also thinking about the work of Professor Krutze about the decentralized construct taxonomy and the need for clear definitions and construct, a concept we use in psychology should have one definition, one way of measuring it, etc. What now if you would use intervention mapping and you would break everything down of mindfulness into performance objectives? What do you want people to do if they have to behave mindfully? What are determinants and what are change objectives? What do they need to learn in terms of specific determinants? And you mentioned acceptance, awareness, non-reactance, which I think is a skill. And then the question, okay, if you go to this step of how can we change those, or how can we reach those objectives, what are methods we can use? And then my feeling says that it's really an umbrella term for a lot of things we already know, and should you not become more specific in order to make it really work? For example, on one of the pages you talk about it's a Western thing, and we forget about the Eastern origins of it. Buddhism you already mentioned. I think these are important parameters of use. So would it not make sense to really break it fully down and I then use intervention mapping, because I think that's very specific and can be very helpful in doing that, but you only spend one little paragraph on it. So that's yeah, you were blamed for it, maybe. But is that not the way forward, to really convince all these authors in the literature that it's something it combines a lot of things we already know, but at the same time it brings something innovative to the field?
First, I wanted to say I agree with you that we need to be extremely specific on what it is, and I think we should use the decentralized
construct
taxonomy. Taxonomy,
yeah.
That one, yes. Because currently everything is all over the place, and we don't have proper guidelines on how to use it in an intervention. There's, of course, some structured programs that exist, but even there, sometimes people change the format and forget to evaluate and measure things. And I think those steps should come before using intervention mapping, because if we're not clear on all of this, on what is mindfulness and how can we use it and what are we trying to change, might not work. So for example, we need to be clear, are we actually trying and modify people's trait mindfulness? Are we just wanting them to have more mindful states? Or are we saying that the goal is we want people to develop a healthy relationship with food? This is the goal, but we're using mindfulness as a method, as an exercise to get to this goal. Yeah. I forgot your other questions, unfortunately.
Well, maybe, I don't know if there's still time.
If it's a short question.
I would turn it around. You say we first need to know, and then we can apply intervention mapping. I would use intervention mapping to learn about the concept and what it is.
It is a very nice idea. If you can organize all of the mindfulness experts in the world to come together and agree.
I will start with you. We will have. Maybe we can meet afterwards.
It's very, very hard to get people to agree on what mindfulness is and how to use it.
Thank you.
And this is a much bigger problem.
Yeah.
I remembered. I had a bigger paragraph on intervention mapping and how to use it, and I used the example of trying to change emotional eating by means of mindfulness. I'm happy to discuss it with you after. I still have the paragraph.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Then we move online, and I would like to ask that Professor De Bruin will be on the screen. Professor De Bruin was also a member of your assessment committee, and he is Professor of Strategic Communication and Artificial Intelligence at the University of Antwerp. And I'd like to thank him that he joins us today, and I'd like to give him the word. Professor De Bruin.
Thank you very much for this. The screen just changed into me seeing only myself, which is not the nicest thing. So yes, this is much, much better. So I want to congratulate you, candidate, on a very well-written PhD thesis. I am really sorry for not being there. It's nice to have this overview of the room where you are. I stood there myself many, many years ago. Some things never change. I see it's still the same room I was in. And then I was looking at the faces in the corona and the supervisors of your thesis and the assessment committee. Sometimes they don't change as well. One thing that I want to compliment you on is the thing that this change. I remember that I did my PhD many, many years ago. I was already impressed by the amount of pages I had in my PhD thesis. I made a joke about it to my supervisor, Hans Brug, that I had more pages than he did, and he couldn't enjoy that comment in front of the audience. But some things do change. And that is like the size of the PhD. And usually it's a font size thing or like spacing, etc., etc. But I was marvelously impressed by not only the quality, but also the quantity of the work. I only received it yesterday, even though it was shipped, I heard, mid-August. So I think even the Belgian postal services had trouble delivering this book to my address. I have a simple question about something in your general discussion, and it's about the application of mindfulness as a health promotion intervention. And I think you already had this discussion before with several of the opponents. But one of the reasons that I went to a communication science department after doing my PhD was that usually when you do a PhD in health promotion, you write all of these things in your discussion. We should do this and we should do that, and then leave that to the other people. And then when you are in a communication science department, and maybe the next opponent will know something about that too, it becomes trickier, right? It becomes trickier in making very concrete, very abstract suggestions. And it is precisely this that I want to discuss with you. When I read that, your thesis, page 291, you have, well, it's essential that it is implemented in a well-designed, theoretically grounded and evidence-based manner to maximize its potential benefits and avoid ineffective and inconsistent applications. All of these are very abstract to me. So please, can you make that sentence concrete? So suppose that you have to write a protocol for the next intervention. You have to write a VENI proposal for the next best intervention on this topic. Can you please elaborate a little bit on what that intervention would look like, please?
Highly esteemed opponent, thank you very much for A, being here, B, for your compliments, and C, for your questions. I have a very, very tough time recommending mindfulness interventions when I see so many other issues in the field that make me that do not make me very confident in this method. So it's very hard to recommend like something there. In terms of having things theoretically grounded, to make this a bit more simple, there's a few models of mindfulness that people have brought forward. So for example, the two-component model of mindfulness, saying there's awareness and there's acceptance. So first step for if you choose to develop an intervention would be to say, okay, mindfulness, I'm going to test this. Does it consist of these two methods? Are they interlinked? Are they separate to promote your health outcome? And be extremely specific in what methods you are going to use to train awareness, to train acceptance, and or both. I would also advise the human writing this proposal to do their research on how to evaluate these individual methods that they are using to change the awareness and the acceptance. How are they going to evaluate them? And also, I would suggest, having read so many interventions, to have a control group that does different mindfulness exercises, and also like weightless control or no intervention group, because I would really like to see people establish the working mechanisms of mindfulness and test them, and eventually maybe refine theory and say, actually, having the two components separate doesn't make any sense. So I think this is something that future research needs to do.
Maybe can I just say that this is still quite abstract?
Okay.
So if you say that you want a control group and the control group gets either they get a waitlist condition. So for me, it's still quite abstract what you are going to do. So suppose that you want to develop an intervention. What would the control group be? How will you measure the outcomes? What are the outcomes? So suppose you have to write a protocol paper.
In an
what would
ideal,
be in the protocol?
yeah, in an ideal world where we have lots of time, resources, and money, I would like to have a group that
but let's suppose we have. Let's suppose
yes.
we have.
Suppose we have. Then I would like one group to do an awareness exercise, and there's plenty of meditation methods you can use. So for example, a body scan to notice what you're feeling in the present moment in your body, for example. And then I would like one other group to do an acceptance exercise, and ideally from the same family. So if, let's say, we're using a meditation base to promote the one thing, I would like them to also do the other, and not, for example, journaling. Journaling could be a non-meditation way of promoting acceptance, for example. Yeah? And then I would like a group that does a completely different exercise, for example, health communication, or just learning about a health behavior, and like what is a risk factor, for example. And then I would one group that is a waitlist and does nothing. And I would like to evaluate each method, of course, pre-post. I would like to measure trait mindfulness, but also for the specific meditation exercises, I would also like a state measure of mindfulness. So if the method in the moment actually increased mindfulness, like right now, I would like that right after as well. And then in the future, another measure of practice as well, if people kept on practicing mindfulness, and also did mindfulness in general as a trait change, and of course the health outcome. But all of that, having said all of that, we need to take a few steps back and be really clear on what is the definition that we are using of mindfulness, what is the model we are using, and which measures. And I think to date there is no fantastic measure that, that is truly appropriate, in my opinion, to catch awareness and acceptance. So I think this is something for a very large consortium to figure out before we talk about interventions.
Okay, thank you. Is there time for a small question?
Yes, there is.
So you may or you may not know that I did research on habits, and we were more or less like dealing with what you are dealing with right now. Like, what is it? Right? I think you know from the scale from Bas Verplank, it has many things. It had automaticity in it, identity, past behavior. You may also have noticed that I no longer do that type of work. So maybe I was you, not dealing with the mindful eating stuff, but with the habit research. Do you think you will be in this field, mindful, mindless eating, in the next 5 years? Yes or no? And why yes or why no?
Very easy. No, absolutely not. I am not touching this. This is my honest opinion. The field has too many issues that I as a human being cannot solve. And my main pet peeve is the current publication landscape, where there's unfortunately lots of humans that benefit from pseudoscience and misinformation on the term mindfulness that make a lot of money to sell their mindfulness programs. And it is very, very clear that they do not want any criticisms and actual good discourse on revisiting and revising this construct and the measures. They don't want this. As such, it has been a nightmare to get chapters published, if I'm very honest. And I have dealt with interesting reviewer cases, and I have said, okay, this field has issues that are bigger than what I can solve. Therefore, I do not see myself there. And if I'm being very honest, things such as habits and other health behavior change methods have more merit, in my opinion. We should use them instead.
So, yeah, so when you talk about misinformation and stuff that's out there, we're talking about influences, I suppose, as a communication science.
I'm sorry, I do have to interrupt.
Oh.
We said one more question, one short question, and that's one means one. So, okay, thank you very much.
That was a compliment.
We have to proceed. So we proceed with Dr. Smit. She is Associate Professor in Health Communication at the University of Amsterdam, and I would like to really thank her that she took the long trip from Amsterdam to join us today, and I'd like to give her the word.
Well, thank you very much. Dear PhD candidate, well, like the previous opponents, I'd like to congratulate you as well as your team. on your interesting thesis. It includes a large set of empirical studies demonstrating a large variety of research skills. And, well, in my personal opinion, you've described all of that in a very structured and pleasant to read style. So it was a pleasure to read it. Also, it has made me realize that having dinner with 2 kids is not as mindful as you might want. And today, of course, I'd like to exchange some ideas with you and ask you some questions. And my first question was triggered by your list of propositions, because there's one proposition that I could not agree more with, where you state in the first one that to better understand the value of mindfulness in health promotion, the field should adhere to clear definitions and matching measurement instruments. And I very much like the conceptual model that you then present in chapter 2 of your thesis, where you intend to help scholars to select their measurement instrument based on explicitly defined mindfulness elements. But I was a bit more confused when I read proposition 5. So perhaps one of your paronyms can read that one.
Questionnaires have well-known limitations, and mindfulness questionnaires present particular difficulties.
Thank you. So I hope that you could explain to me what makes mindfulness as a concept and mindfulness questionnaires in particular so special that you formulated this proposition, and why do you think it's different from the measurement of other theoretical concepts with a multidimensional nature?
Esteemed opponent, thank you very much for your compliments and also for coming all of this way and for the question. So, mindfulness questionnaires have the issue that you have to be aware of your own awareness. And if you are not aware of being aware, you cannot answer some of the questions. And it takes very special humans that are truly reflecting on their thoughts and their emotions to even answer these questions. And my honest opinion is that most mindfulness questionnaires are phrased in a way that the majority cannot answer them. And I also particularly put this in here because when you start out, and let's say you have good intentions, you want to deliver a mindfulness intervention, and you want to measure it, which less than 40% do, but let's say you want to do this, and you look at the literature, and you see the amount of mindfulness questionnaires that are out there. You don't know where to start, and they're all so different in how they combine scores, separate scores, and how they conceptualize mindfulness. So it was very important for me to put in a proposition to address A, there's absolute chaos on how we define it, how we measure it, and everybody does something else. And B, yeah, you have to, yeah, you need to think about your thoughts, and most people don't. And there's mindfulness questionnaires that were really developed with non-practitioners, with complete novices in mind. But unfortunately, also the opposite is true, that measures were conceptualized for experts. And those are sometimes used for novices after an intervention, even though they might not know how to answer it. They maybe have never thought about thinking about their emotions. So I think they're phrased too complicated for the majority.
Okay, so then you try to bring some order into that chaos, right? Where you developed the mindful eating skill that you translated to Dutch, validated, and then created a short form for. And you present this work in chapter 4 of your thesis. And I wonder whether reducing the number of questionnaire items from 29 in the original scale to 19 in the short form will indeed obtain the goals that you describe, and that's not so much in terms of, well, bringing that order in the chaos, but more as to, administering the questionnaire in an acceptable way. Because although I can see that 19 items is less than 29, of course, I wonder whether you are actually convinced that a 19-item scale is acceptable in terms of participant burden when this scale is implemented in scientific research, except from the part whether they understand it or not. But do you think this is not still rather lengthy?
I would agree with you that 19 is still quite big, But when you have 4 separate subscales that tap into 2 awareness and 2 acceptance components that are theoretically different, I had a bit of trouble reducing it to a lot less items. And of course, in scale construction, you should have at least 3 items per subscale. So
Which would bring me to 12.
Which would bring it to 12. If you look at how well some of the items clumped together, it felt wrong to separate them because some were needed for additional context. I still think, though, that 19 is appropriate, but of course be mindful that you are then not administering a lot of other measures to your participants. Then I think 19 is still very much fine. And if you compare the FAMES, even with its 29 items, is less than most mindfulness questionnaires, which are 39, sometimes even more. So I think the number is still appropriate. And I do stand by the decision to reduce it to this amount. And having looked at the Dutch translation, but also having worked with the French and the German translation and the original English one, I'm quite confident in the items I have now selected, and these are the best ones in my opinion.
Okay. Can I ask one final short question?
Definitely.
Okay. Because, well, let's say that you've now convinced me that in scientific research 19 items would be acceptable. Then I do want to ask a follow-up question, because you also recommend in your thesis that this short form can facilitate the integration of mindful eating assessments in clinical practice, enabling healthcare professionals to efficiently monitor participants' mindfulness, mindful eating skills. But I wonder whether that is true, given that healthcare professionals often, if not always, have a lack of time when it comes to the implementation of lifestyle counseling in their clinical practice. So I wonder if you can elaborate just a bit more on how you envision this systematic integration in clinical practice, which is already so packed.
Yeah, I think I should have been more specific in that regard, because one clinical application I definitely see is in bariatric surgery. So when you're having your clients come in to schedule the consult for weight loss surgery, you can administer some questions, and unfortunately it's not done in all countries that deliver bariatric surgery, that you do the psychological assessment with your clients and that you help them actually change the behavior and the relationship that they have with food. And I think there, as part of, hopefully in the future, more and more countries are doing it and providing the mental health support to sneak in an assessment. The question is then, should a mindfulness questionnaire be used, or should we talk about other constructs such as emotional eating or other relationship with food or distress regarding food scales? But I think there could be room, but not necessarily when people go to the GP. Yeah.
No, but also preferably not on the day that they arrive for their surgery, right?
No, like before then, when you're talking your client through what they need, what's going to happen, what support they need.
Okay, well, thank you for that clarification.
Thank you very much. Then we move to the last opponent, which is Dr. Schneider. She is assistant professor of the Department of Health Promotion at Maastricht University, and I'd like to give her the opportunity to ask some questions.
Yes, thank you very much. I would also like to congratulate you on this impressive work, and I would also extend the congratulations to the team. These types of dissertations you only see once in a year, like the thickness of them. So I know that it takes a lot of perseverance and intrinsic motivation, so congratulations on that. And I must honestly say, it also doesn't surprise me, because I already had the idea the first time I actually saw you online, when you entered the master in COVID times. That already gave me an impression that we could expect these amounts of work from you. So my congratulations there. It might not come as a surprise. I share the same passion for intervention mapping. So my question was also going that way, and I was afraid that there was going to be some overlap. But actually, your answer and the nice discussion that you had led to a lot more questions. And I hope that you can sort of maybe clarify all the answers that you gave. So I would like to especially go into mindfulness as a determinant and mindfulness as a theoretical method or behavior change strategy, if you wish to use that term. So first start with the determinant there. I think the answer, let me rephrase, let me put the question maybe in a different way of thinking, because I know that you are an artist. If I was to ask you to make a painting of mindfulness as a determinant, what would you paint and how would other people recognize it as mindfulness? If painting is too difficult, you can also use words to explain what it would be.
Esteemed opponent, thank you very much for your compliments.
Yes.
And of course for this interesting question. I prepared for a lot of questions, but not for this one.
Yeah.
So let me walk you through the way that I develop my paintings. It
Short,
takes,
because I have another one coming.
It takes a long time to develop
Yes.
a painting and to truly think about meanings. So on the spot, very honestly, I cannot come up with an image. This needs inspiration from multiple sources and then showering and then thinking about it. So let's try. Okay, so you wanted to know how would I make mindfulness as a determinant recognizable to people?
Especially because you mentioned that there's a lot of diverse definitions going on, and that's a huge challenge, and I understand that, and all the summaries that you've written, but you are an expert now. Yeah. What is your core definition of mindfulness as a determinant? What would it be if you add it to the field?
If, what would it be? It would be, I would like to, again, split it up into its components, because I think the word is an umbrella and too broad to truly know what it is. So I would like to make it more concrete. And I would say awareness is something changeable. You can learn to pay more attention to your needs, to your thoughts and your emotions. And you can also learn, I just thought of an image. There you go. For example, imagine yourself at a train station. And you hear the announcement that, of course, your train is going to come soon, but before your train is coming, there's another cargo train. And it's going to rush through the station, so please step away from the platform. This is a nice metaphor for what I think mindfulness is. So you are recognizing there's a train coming. That's not good. I'm going to get caught in the wind or potentially die if I don't step back. And this is a metaphor for a thought. You notice the thoughts are coming, the emotions are coming, they're really intense, and you'd get caught in them, but you learn to take a step back.
So then if I then take that description of determinant, I would like to go to the methods, because you said several things that are still on my mind. You talk about that a lot of interventions mix elements that we know as theoretical methods with mindfulness, and that is a problem. And now you also talk about components. So it has an awareness component, it has an attitudinal component. So maybe a bold statement. What if I say that mindfulness is not a method in itself, but it's a way of delivering all the types of methods that we are used to use? Are you agree? And what is then, if you don't agree, what is the additional thing that mindfulness adds? So if you were to add that to the taxonomy, what would it be?
Yeah, that is a very, very good question. I think current people that are administering mindfulness as a method are not necessarily aware of the behavior change field. And they don't know that we explicitly mean things like feedback, self-efficacy, change methods for those things. They don't necessarily know that those exist. So they think, okay, we should develop a mindfulness intervention. We let people meditate a little bit, oversimplification, but we let them meditate for a little bit. But wouldn't it be nice if they also know a little bit about cooking? And wouldn't it be nice if they have a group to bounce ideas off of?
Yeah,
but they don't.
But I don't have the
specify.
expertise you have on mindfulness. So I looked at especially chapter 3, where you describe all the interventions, and I know the theoretical methods like feedback, goal setting, things like that. But I'm still is then mindfulness types of interventions, is that a vehicle? Is that a way of delivering all these methods? Or is there something unique that is mindfulness?
I would say it is different.
And what is it?
Different method in this case than other health promotion interventions, because you're addressing very sensitive emotional components. And I wouldn't say that calling something a mindfulness intervention is a vehicle to deliver also other behavior change methods. I think those are very separate methods, and oftentimes those are addressing more the rational component, whereas the mindfulness is more the emotional component.
But there are also interventions that deal with difficult emotions, and they focus on emotion regulation. Is that mindfulness a way of wrapping emotion regulation type of methods, or?
It's really, really difficult to answer because of how much.
This is why I'm asking you, because I also don't have the answer.
How many differences there are of using mindfulness interventions. And normally, like pure mindfulness interventions should be just mindfulness and not behavior change. I do agree that when you're addressing emotion regulation, then it could be a method to deliver emotion
that's
regulation.
interesting, because you say they need to be mindfulness and not all the other things. So if you have an intervention and we strip off all the other things, what's left?
Ideally, emotion regulation.
Okay, we can talk later whether that is actually a unique method that's still left. Yes.
And as you notice, the beetle gets in at a perfect time, So, Mr. Candidate, Mr. Preißner, the time appointed for defending your thesis has now officially passed. The degree committee now will withdraw, not to discuss the quality of your thesis, that has been approved, but we're going to discuss the way you have defended your thesis this morning, and we also take in that collaboration, also in this discussion, also your presentation. I request that you and your company await the results of our deliberation and the return to the aula. Thank you very much. Still, dear Mr. Candidate, dear Mr. Preißner, the degree committee here present has assessed the quality of your thesis, but in particular the way you have defended your thesis, and we also took in consideration the presentation you have given this morning. In view of a positive verdict and taking into account your previous qualifications, the degree committee has decided to grant you the degree of doctor. Professor de Vries is authorized to confer upon you this academic distinction in accordance to Dutch university customs, and therefore I invite your supervisor now to take the floor. I give you the word.
Well, we start. I don't think it's working, but I'll speak clearly. Oh, now it's working. Okay, I'll start with a question. So we'll still have research. Do you promise to work in accordance with the principles of scientific integrity at all times, to be careful and honest, transparent, independent, and responsible?
Yes, I promise.
Okay, then by the authority vested in us by law and in conformity with the decision of the committee hereby present, I hereby confer upon you, Christian Erik Preißner, the degree of doctor and grant you all rights attached by custom and law. And as evidence of this, I now present you with a degree certificate signed by the rector, the secretary, and the other members of the committee, and affixed with the official seal of the university. Okay, just some few words before I give the floor to my colleague. Christian, you came here, well, we first came into touch with each other when you wrote me an email that you would love to develop an e-health intervention on mindful eating. Okay, then you came here to Maastricht, and you did wonderful work, and it was a pleasure to working with you. And now you tell us that you're leaving the field because of all sorts of reasons that we are aware of course. Yet, I truly think that you are a unique scientific scholar, and I hope that you will find in one way or another way a possibility to continue that in science or in art. But I certainly will miss our collaboration. Well, we still have some unfinished work to do, so we will not immediately stop. But I will, and I do, will miss it. But I want to thank you and congratulate you, and also gratulieren für deine Familie und Freunde. Und wir reden nie auf Deutsch, aber aber ja, ich hoffe, dass alles sehr gut mit dir gehen soll. Okay, now to Anke. Has to put on the glasses.
Yes, thank you. Dear Christian, Dr. Preißner, congratulations on this great achievement and on your newly earned title. It is very well deserved, and you can be really proud of yourself, like I promised you before. Today, during your defense, you have demonstrated some of the characteristics that make you a very special person and that made your PhD trajectory so successful. You are very passionate about the topic, at least you were in the beginning, and I think you still are. You are very knowledgeable on many different aspects of research, be it theory, or methodology, or statistics. You are a very fast thinker. You have a clear opinion on things, but you're also very eager to discuss and debate about this, and I think we have seen it today. But on top of that, you are also a very hard worker and very creative too. That you have been working very hard during your PhD trajectory shows from your dissertation itself. It has already been mentioned before, but it's a massive piece of work, and it's a very thick book. With many chapters in it, and also with the diversity of topics in it. But this is only part of the work that you did. you conducted a couple of extensive systematic reviews, and you already mentioned how many articles you have to work through to create these systematic reviews. And you also have designed and conducted 2 longitudinal studies, and you have written many, many papers out of that. You have so many material and so many papers on the go that you would almost be able to produce a second dissertation. And then, apart from the work that is in this book now, there was also a lot of work that went into these papers. Because oftentimes, your papers had to be sized down, because there were too many ideas in them. And in the beginning of your project, during our supervisory meetings, we sometimes talked about skyscrapers, multi-story buildings that should be sized down to tiny houses. Because you often came up with so many ideas that your papers were like skyscrapers. And then Hein and me had to tell you that you had to size it down into tiny houses. Because that would make it much easier to bring your ideas across to other people. And so you did. You never hesitated to structurally rework your papers to make them accessible to readers and to kill some of your darlings, like Hein would say. You never had a writer's block, at least not that we know of. You had so many ideas about papers that you not just named them paper 1, 2, and 3, but you had paper 1.25, 1.75, or paper X, or paper Y. And these were not just subsequent versions of the same paper, but they were all separate papers organized in a particular structure. And sometimes you produced them in such a very short time, because you had to get the ideas out of your head, even if you had to do that in the middle of the night or very early in the morning. Sometimes we, at least I, felt like the weakest link in the chain, because at times it was so difficult to keep up your fast pace. But nevertheless, this whole trajectory, Christian, it was a great pleasure to be with you in this process. And luckily, we could also teach you some things. You also turned out to be a very good and inspiring teacher yourself. Because as much as you liked research and as much as you seem to be a born researcher, you like teaching. Not the type of teaching in crowded settings, but the small groups or one-on-one supervision of students. And building on your own experiences, you really liked coaching students, helping to get the best out of themselves. And you were very successful in doing so, given the feedback that you received from students. And you also embarked on top of all the research that you did, on getting your university teaching qualification. And as a cherry on the pie, you will receive your qualification soon. But now, what about Christian and mindfulness himself? How mindful is Christian, and does he pray what he preaches? Well, I'm not giving you the answer. You can ask him later during the celebration. But I do know that the massive amount of work that you performed and the amount of energy that went into it needed counterbalancing and activities to re-energize. And luckily, you have your creative side that needs space and balance, that needs to balance the cognitive work. Painting was one of your most important creative outlets, and you had many painting projects on the go during your PhD trajectory. And the front cover of your dissertation is a very nice example of it. And then there were the animals. As a volunteer at the animal farm, you cared for the animals with great dedication, and in return, they helped you manage your mental health and balance. It was always very nice to hear you talking so passionately about the farm and the animals. And you did not keep the joy of these activities for yourself, but you shared them with others. You organized tours to the animal farm and painting clinics for your fellow PhD students, and others even. And this made you, as a person who worked a lot from home, I think one of the most social persons. And all these activities were highly appreciated. Lastly, it has also been a joy to see how you have developed as a person and how you have overcome issues and difficulties that you have been struggling with during your life. I think that starting your PhD project and coming to Maastricht has done you very well. You found yourself a very nice place to live and have investigated and tried many new things, work-wise, but also in your personal life. And I believe that the entire process has enriched you and made you grow. At least it has extended your personal circle with Leonard and with your cat, Ati. Christian, it was a wonderful journey working with you. Thanks for that. Also on behalf of Dennis, Hein already mentioned it. And now I will finish, but not before I congratulate you again. Also on behalf of Dennis, and the congratulations also go to Leonard and to your parents. Congratulations. We wish you all the best for the future. But now it's time to celebrate. And I give the word back to the director.
Dear Dr. Preißner, may I use the words now? And I think as you notice your body language, you enjoy this to be called Dr. Preißner. Okay. I also would like to congratulate you on behalf of Maastricht University. I also would like to congratulate you with your presentation, because we unanimously said it was a great presentation, a presentation from an artist. And if I look into your booklet, I notice your travel around the world. You went to Samoa. I've never been there. You went to McGill. I've been there. And then you returned to Maastricht, which is like an anti-reflex to me. But I would like to make something, another last remark. You mentioned that you're an artist. So I looked at your front cover, yes? And it's written here. And I noticed two things. The person you put in the middle, he's looking eastwards, not westwards. And most of the paintings, people look westwards. So you like to look to Germany, which is eastward. Yes? That's the first thing. And then in the second, and that's much more important, you said you're an artist and you like to work on mindfulness, but most of your clouds are white and not dark. And I was very surprised about that, because mindfulness is mostly associated with dark clouds, which you have to envision. But that's something which we're going to discuss later. Now it's time to celebrate. In my celebration and in my words, I also would like to congratulate the promotion team. And again, you started October 21, so you finished in 4 years. And I must say, with 10 papers, which is enormous. And that's a really big compliment to you, but also to your promotion team. I would like to thank the members of the Corona to join us today, the members from outside, from Antwerp, and the members also from Amsterdam. Thank you again. I would like to congratulate the full family. I can speak fluently German, but I'm not going to do it today. So I'd say thank you for joining us. I'm not sure if you all come from Bremen, which is pretty far away. And I think we have to close now. And for closing the ceremony officially, I will use my hammer, and I close the ceremony. How are we?